Hello, my love. Welcome back to Letters to My Love, ASMR. The path is quiet today, even quieter than usual. There is a gentle sort of rain falling, the kind that never truly seems to arrive all at once. It simply appears in the air, as though the sky has decided to breathe a little more softly. I find I rather like this sort of weather. It slows everything. The countryside grows thoughtful in rain like this. The fields dim just slightly beneath the clouds. The trees hold their branches a little more still, and the gravel beneath one's steps seems to hush itself in courtesy. You would like it here today, I think. It is early afternoon, though the light is gentle enough that one might almost mistake it for morning. The sky is a quiet shade of grey, not dark, not heavy, simply a blanket of cloud that softens the whole world. And every so often, one hears a bird somewhere beyond the hedgerow, calling out as if to confirm that the day continues exactly as it should. I have taken the familiar path this afternoon, the same narrow trail that curves away from the cottage, slipping between the low stone wall and the fields that stretch beyond it. The ground is damp beneath my boots, though not unpleasantly so. There is something rather comforting about the scent of rain touching the earth again after winter. March has a curious personality in the countryside. It is not quite winter, and yet spring has not entirely made up its mind to arrive. The trees are still mostly bare, their branches reaching upward like quiet sketches against the sky. But if one looks closely, there are small hints of change beginning. Tiny buds, no larger than a grain of rice, waiting patiently along the twigs. The land always knows before we do, before the warmth comes, before the days lengthen, before the birds truly return. There is always this moment first, this quiet pause in the year where everything seems to be gathering itself. And somehow, I find that this moment reminds me of you. Not in a dramatic way, nothing so theatrical, just in that gentle sense of promise, the kind that does not rush, the kind that simply exists, steady and certain. My coat has gathered the smallest beads of rain along the sleeves now. Not enough to trouble anyone, just enough to feel the coolness of the afternoon resting lightly in the air. I walk slowly along this path most days when I am here. There is no need to hurry in the countryside. The world moves at a far more agreeable pace. Even the wind seems content to wander rather than rush. And when the rain falls like this, the whole landscape seems to settle into a quieter rhythm. One can hear one's own footsteps again, soft against the damp gravel, measured, unrushed. The hedgerows to my left are beginning to wake as well, though winter has stripped them back somewhat. There are small green shoots appearing here and there among the branches. Determined little things. They always seem to arrive long before anyone expects them. A small bird has just landed somewhere ahead along the fence line. I cannot quite see it through the branches, but it has been singing the same quiet pattern for the past minute or so. A simple little melody. Nothing grand, but somehow perfectly suited to an afternoon like this. There are moments, walking here, when the countryside feels almost aware of itself, as though the land is stretching gently after a long winter sleep, breathing again. I suppose that is what early spring truly is. Not the arrival of warmth, not yet. Just the quiet promise that it will come. And promises, my love, are something I have been thinking about quite a bit today. The path curves gently ahead now. It follows the rise of the land, slipping between the old hedgerow and a line of tall trees that have stood here longer than any of the cottages nearby. Their branches reach wide above the trail, creating a sort of natural archway. In the summer months, the leaves grow so thick that the path beneath becomes shaded and cool. But today, with the branches still mostly bare, the soft daylight filters easily through them. The rain catches on the smaller twigs first, tiny droplets gathering there, clinging for a moment, before falling quietly to the ground below. It creates a gentle rhythm. Rain from the sky, rain from the branches. The rain has settled now into a steadier rhythm. Not heavier, just consistent. A soft curtain of droplets drifting through the air, quiet enough that one only truly notices it when the sound gathers gently among the leaves. The path has grown darker beneath my steps as the gravel drinks in the water. Each footfall carries that faint, damp sound of stone shifting beneath the surface. It is a comforting sort of rhythm for walking. One step, then another. The countryside seems to move along with it. The hedgerows beside the trail have grown thicker here. Their branches weave together in places, creating small pockets of shelter where birds seem to prefer gathering during weather like this. I can hear them occasionally, just beyond the leaves. Soft movements, a quiet flutter of wings, and every now and then a short, thoughtful chirp, as if one of them has remembered something important to say. The rain on the branches above me has begun to form a second pattern now. Some droplets fall directly from the sky. Others gather along the limbs of the trees, lingering there until their weight grows just enough to release them. They fall more slowly, one by one, landing softly on the path or the moss along the stone wall. It is remarkable how many small sounds appear when the world becomes quiet enough. Even the wind seems gentler today. It moves through the trees with a sort of patience, rustling only the highest branches as it passes. March wind can often be sharp in the countryside, but today it behaves rather differently, more like a visitor, wandering politely through the fields. The air carries that familiar scent again, damp earth, fresh rain, and something faintly green, almost too subtle to name, the sort of scent that appears only when the land is beginning to wake. One might almost miss it if they walked too quickly. But when the pace of the day slows, it becomes easier to notice. I find that early spring asks for patience in this way. Nothing arrives suddenly. No dramatic changes. Just the quiet layering of small signs, one after another. A bud appearing along a branch. A bird returning to a familiar hedge. A patch of green pushing carefully through the soil. All of it unfolding in its own time. And somehow, that slow unfolding reminds me of the way affection grows between two people. Not rushed, not demanded. Simply allowed. Allowed to deepen, little by little, until one day it feels as though it has always been there. The path ahead bends slightly to the right now. Beyond the curve, the trees begin to grow taller, older, their trunks wider than a person's embrace. I have always liked this part of the walk. The rain sounds different beneath these branches, softer somehow, filtered through the canopy above, as though the trees themselves are lending their quiet protection to the afternoon. And somewhere just beyond this bend, there is a place where I often stop for a while. Not because the walk is long, but because the moment always feels worth pausing for. And today, with the rain so gentle, it seems like the sort of afternoon that invites lingering. The trees grow closer together here. Their branches stretch wide above the path, reaching toward one another until they form a loose canopy overhead. Even in early March, before the leaves have fully returned, there is still a sense of shelter beneath them. The rain falls through the branches in soft intervals. Some droplets land upon my coat. Others fall quietly into the grass beside the trail. And some gather along the rough bark before sliding slowly down the trunks. The sound of the countryside changes slightly in places like this. It becomes more enclosed, more thoughtful, as though the trees have agreed to hold the quiet for a while. I slow my steps further here, partly out of habit, and partly because the air feels particularly calm beneath these branches. The path narrows just slightly now. The stone wall that followed the trail earlier has given way to a patch of moss-covered earth, where roots from the larger trees have begun to rise gently through the soil. They twist along the ground like old, patient lines in a drawing, each one shaped by decades of slow growth. It is difficult not to admire such patience. Nature seems perfectly content to take its time with everything. The rain grows quieter again, not because it has stopped, but because the branches above catch so much of it before it reaches the ground. Somewhere nearby, a bird has begun a longer song now, a gentle sequence of notes, careful and unhurried. It echoes softly through the trees. And then, after a moment, another bird answers from somewhere further along the path. The two of them trade melodies back and forth for a while, a quiet conversation carried through the branches. Moments like this make one aware of how peaceful the countryside can be when the world is allowed to move slowly. Even the rain seems to settle into the rhythm, falling softly, patiently. The bend in the path is just ahead now. Beyond it, the trees open slightly. Not enough to lose the shelter of the branches, but enough that a certain old oak becomes visible from the trail. It stands a little apart from the others, its trunk wide, its branches stretching outward with the quiet confidence that comes from having stood in one place for many, many years. Beneath it, there is a simple wooden bench, weathered just slightly by the seasons. Nothing remarkable at first glance. And yet, it has become something of a favourite stopping place along this walk. The sort of place where one might sit for a moment, listen to the rain through the leaves, and allow a few quiet thoughts to settle into words. Today, I believe I shall do exactly that. The oak is just as I remembered it. Standing quietly at the edge of the path, as though it has been waiting here for many years without the slightest impatience. Its trunk is wide, broader than one might expect at first glance. The bark darkens slightly by the gentle rain. Small streams of water travel slowly down its surface, tracing familiar lines in the wood before disappearing into the moss gathered at the roots. The branches stretch outward in every direction. Even now, in early March, when the leaves have not yet returned, the tree still manages to create a soft shelter beneath it. The rain filters through the higher branches first. Some droplets fall easily through the open spaces. Others gather briefly along the limbs before drifting down more slowly. It makes the air beneath the oak feel quieter somehow, as though the world has agreed to speak in softer tones here. The bench rests exactly where it always has, just to one side of the trunk, positioned so that whoever sits upon it may look out across the fields beyond the path. It is a simple bench, wooden slats, weathered slightly from the passing seasons, the edges softened by time, the grain of the wood darkened here and there by rain and sunlight. There is nothing particularly grand about it, and perhaps that is precisely why I like it. Places that do not attempt to impress anyone often become the most comfortable of all. I brush a few droplets of rain from the surface with the sleeve of my coat. Not that it matters very much. The air today is cool enough that a little rain is hardly a concern. And so, I take my seat beneath the oak. The countryside stretches quietly beyond the branches. Fields softened by the grey light of the afternoon. Hedgerows tracing gentle lines along the land, and the distant trees standing watch over it all. The rain continues its quiet rhythm among the branches above me. Soft, patient, exactly the sort of afternoon that invites a letter. I reach into the inner pocket of my coat. There, tucked safely away, is the small leather notebook I brought along for the walk. It has accompanied me on many afternoons like this. The leather has softened over time, the corners rounded slightly from years of quiet use. Inside, the pages hold a number of thoughts that seemed worth keeping. Observations, fragments of ideas, and, occasionally, a letter meant for you. The notebook rests comfortably in my hands now, familiar, reliable. I open it slowly, turning past a few earlier pages until I find an empty sheet waiting patiently near the back. The paper carries that faint sound that only good pages seem to make, a quiet whisper as they shift beneath one's fingers. From another pocket, I retrieve the pen. A fountain pen I have carried for years. Nothing extravagant, just well balanced and agreeable to write with. The sort of pen that seems to encourage thoughtful sentences rather than hurried ones. I rest the notebook lightly against my knee. The rain continues its soft conversation among the branches overhead. And for a moment, I simply sit here, looking out across the quiet fields, thinking of you. There is a certain calm that arrives when one begins a letter meant for someone dear, a gentle gathering of thoughts, not rushed, not forced, just the quiet arrangement of words that wish to be written. And so, I begin. My love. This afternoon has carried a quiet sort of rain, the gentle kind that seems less like weather and more like a soft mood settling over the countryside. I have taken my usual walk along the path beyond the cottage today. You would recognize it immediately, I think. The narrow trail between the hedgerow and the fields, the same line of tall trees watching patiently over the bend in the path. The air carries that familiar scent that arrives each year when winter begins to loosen its grip. Damp earth, fresh rain, and something faintly green that cannot quite be named yet. It is early March now. The countryside has not fully decided to welcome spring, but the signs are appearing quietly nonetheless. Small buds along the branches, birdsong returning in careful intervals, and the earth itself beginning to soften again after the long patience of winter. There is something rather comforting about this part of the year. Nothing is hurried. Nothing demands attention. The world simply begins again. As I walked along the path today, I found myself thinking of how certain moments in life resemble this season. Moments when something new is arriving, though not loudly, not suddenly, just gradually and with quiet certainty. And of course, it was impossible not to think of you. There are many ways one might attempt to describe affection. Poets have tried for centuries, sometimes with remarkable success. But today, sitting here beneath this old oak tree, I find that the simplest truth is the most satisfying. Loving you feels remarkably natural. As natural, perhaps, as the countryside beginning its slow return to spring. There is no sense of effort in it, no confusion, just a steady warmth that seems to settle quietly into the heart and remain there. The rain has softened even further while I have been writing. It falls through the branches above me now in delicate intervals. Every so often, a droplet lands upon the page beside my hand, leaving the faintest mark before disappearing. I rather like that. It feels as though the afternoon itself has decided to participate in the letter. A small bird has taken shelter somewhere within the branches above the bench. I can hear it shifting occasionally, feathers brushing softly against the bark. It reminds me of how peaceful the countryside can be when the world allows itself to slow down. Moments like this make one appreciate the quiet things, the sound of rain through leaves, the scent of the fields beyond the path, the calm certainty of knowing that somewhere, not terribly far away, you exist in the same world. And somehow, my love, that thought alone makes the afternoon feel warmer. The rain continues, though it has grown softer now. A sort of rain that almost disappears into the air if one listens too quickly. Only the occasional droplet falling from the branches above reminds me that the clouds have not quite finished their work. I remain seated here, beneath the oak, the notebook resting easily against my knee, the letter slowly filling the page. And yet, for a moment, the pen rests quietly between my fingers. Because sometimes a letter asks for a small pause. Not because the words have run away, but because they are arriving gently, one at a time, like footsteps along a quiet path. The countryside seems to approve of such pauses. Nothing here insists on urgency. The fields remain patient. The trees remain steady. Even the rain, falling softly through the branches, appears perfectly content to take its time. I imagine you sitting here beside me sometimes, not speaking, not needing to, just listening to the quiet rhythm of the afternoon. You have always understood that sort of silence, the comfortable kind, the kind that does not ask for words in order to feel full. I think that may be one of the things I admire most about you. Your presence never rushes a moment. It allows the moment to become itself. Much like this gentle afternoon beneath the oak. The air carries the scent of damp soil again. It drifts upward from the earth with every small breath of wind that passes through the trees. That scent always reminds me that the world is quietly renewing itself, even when nothing dramatic appears to be happening. The work of life continues beneath the surface. seeds preparing themselves, roots stretching slowly through the soil, branches waiting patiently for the warmth that will soon return. And somehow, thinking of these quiet preparations reminds me again of you, because the affection I carry for you has never felt hurried. It did not arrive like a storm. It arrived more like this season, gradually, softly, until one day I realized it had become something steady, something natural, something that belonged in my life as comfortably as these fields belong to the countryside. I suppose there are many ways to describe devotion, but the word that returns to me most often is peace. Because when I think of you, the world seems to settle, much like this afternoon settling beneath the rain. Calm, unhurried, exactly as it ought to be. The path feels quieter now as I begin the walk back toward the cottage. The rain has faded into little more than a cool mist resting in the air. Beneath the trees, the ground still carries that gentle scent of damp earth and moss. My steps fall softly along the gravel once again, unhurried. The notebook rests safely in the pocket of my coat now, your letter tucked inside, waiting patiently until the next time our paths cross. The countryside moves slowly beside the trail, fields stretching quietly beneath the pale afternoon sky, the hedgerows whispering softly as the wind drifts through them. And somewhere behind me, the old oak stands exactly where it has always stood, steady, patient, watching the seasons change one quiet day at a time. I think you would have liked that spot very much. Perhaps one day, when the spring has fully arrived, we will sit there together for a while, listening to the birds, watching the rain pass through the branches, allowing the afternoon to unfold slowly around us. But for now, the path continues gently forward. The cottage waits somewhere just beyond the rise ahead. A warm room, a quiet fire, and the calm comfort of evening drawing nearer. I walk a little further along the trail, the countryside settling peacefully around the day. And as always, my love, you remain with me, quietly, steadily, like warmth carried home through the rain. Thank you for listening this evening. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you. And if you're still awake, you might enjoy the next letter waiting for you here.